Hi, my name is Joe Edge. I'm here at the tax shop in Port St. Lucie. Today I'd like to talk to you about off-duty details and how our law enforcement officers are paid for those details. First, let me give you an overview of the entire process. Depending on the agency you work for, some of those agencies will pay you directly through your paycheck in a separate line item for the off-duty detail hours that you work. Other agencies will issue you a 1099. And this method of doing it has been going on for many years now, and it depends on the agency as to how you are paid and compensated for those hours. Okay. Prior to 2010, many clients expressed a concern that they were paying too much in taxes for their off-duty details. And since taxes aren't withheld every payday, it for some of them created a financial hardship at the end of the year. So we did some research back then and found that based on the IRS rulings and definitions of what an employee is and what a subcontractor is, there was a gray area that we as tax preparers and the taxpayers needed a clarification on whether or not you as a law enforcement officer, when you're working off-duty details, were either an employee of the agency or a independent contractor of the agency. Obviously, some of the agencies that did it then and are still doing it now are issuing 1099s, which implies that you are an independent contractor of the agency. But there's many conflicting questions as to the determination of whether you're an employee or an independent contractor. So typically at the end of every year, you would get a 1099, which looks something like this. Okay? Obviously, the taxpayer's name and other particulars are blacked out, but this is what a typical 1099 would look like. And in Block 7, it shows the amount that you would receive as non-employee compensation for the work and hours you worked for the off-duty details. Okay? So during that time period, what we did was, on behalf of the taxpayers and as part of doing their tax returns, we completed a form called an SS8, and that's what this is right here. You have to fill in a bunch of particulars about who you are, the agency you work for, and then it asks questions about how you are treated during the time you are working these details, meaning supervisory, control issues, and how you're treated financially and how you're paid. Once we send that SS8 form to the IRS, within a year or so, they made a determination as to whether you were an employee or an independent contractor. And how that process worked was the SS8 form would go to the IRS, they would send it to the agency you work for, at which time they had to answer basically the same questions that the taxpayer did when we filled out the SS8 on their behalf. In June of 2011, the IRS made a determination that, I can read it exactly here for you. The letter dated June 17th, 2011, and a copy of this is on file here at our office. We hold the officers to be employees of the city/county when performing off-duty services. And then the rest of the letter goes into the details of how they made that decision. At that time, many of the agencies that continued to pay the officers as independent contractors filed appeals with the IRS, and those appeals, to my knowledge, have not been answered by the IRS as of yet. So the agencies have continued to issue 1099s to the officers for the off-duty details that they work. Basically, the financial impact of that to you as a law enforcement officer is you're paying not only federal income tax on the money you have earned, you are also paying self-employment tax at double the rate that you would normally do as an employee. So just to give you an example, I'm an employer and you work for me. And when I pay you your paycheck, you pay Social Security out of your paycheck, and I as an employer have to match it. Well, when you get a 1099, since there's nobody that matches the Social Security, you as the taxpayer are required to pay that. That's what's caused a lot of the issues and problems with this. And we are still waiting for a response on the appeals that were filed by the local law enforcement agencies from the IRS. But how you should proceed to fix this problem and pay the least amount of tax is as follows. Each year when you get your 1099, the IRS has a form called an 8919, IRS form 8919. And basically what that form does is it splits up the financial responsibility of the Social Security and Medicare tax that you were paying before on the 1099, and now splits it up to where you only have to pay your portion of it. And it identifies on that form the agency responsible for the other half. And that's how you break up the taxes. The problems that this causes is a lot of officers are able to write off what we call unreimbursed employee expenses, expenses that you incur that you're required to by your job that your job does not reimburse you for. Weapons, uniform cleaning, union dues, things like that. These would typically not be associated directly with your off-duty details, so you can't write them off just for your off-duty details. So all of your unreimbursed employee expenses should be reported on Schedule A as an unreimbursed employee expense and not on Schedule C. So that's something you need to be aware of, regardless of who does your tax return for you. If you do it yourself or you go to another tax professional, that tax professional needs to be aware of the June 17th, 2011 decision from the IRS that resolved this conflict between the agencies and the law enforcement officers on how they report their income for their off-duty details. If you have any questions, we would be happy to answer those for you. Our phone number here at our office is 772-879-2895,